sports psychologist Dr. Andrew Jacobs, located in Kansas City, by the way, home of the Chiefs, for those of you who don't know that. And welcome to our live stream event here tonight. You know, I've been on the radio for 33 years, and actually tomorrow will be July 31st. And 43 years ago tomorrow, I got my PhD in clinical psychology with an expertise in sports psychology. So I've been doing this quite a long time. Over the past few years, in addition to our show on the radio, we've launched the Sports Psychology Hours, of podcast. My radio show is on 810 WHB.com every Sunday morning from 7 to 8 a.m. Central Time. It's podcasted everywhere, especially on my website. Visit my website, winnersunlimited.com, click on the podcast tab, and you can hear all kinds of episodes of the show. That's on winnersunlimited.com. And I've been doing a new series of interviews and conversations focusing on coaches and athletes. And today we're lucky to have David Durand with us. He's a sports performance and psychology coach in New Orleans. He's also an author, and he's very much into the things that we talk about on the show, and I'm glad to have him on. So David, thanks for joining us tonight. There you are. Are you there?
So sorry about that. Yep,
No
back on. A
problem.
little bit of bad weather outside, so just got a little spotty for a second.
No problem. So thanks for joining us tonight, David. I appreciate it. So tell us a little bit about your work and how you get into all this, because I always love talking with people who get into the field of sports psychology and how they got interested in it and what motivated them to get started.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, thanks for having me, and yeah, looking forward to chatting. So I've always loved sports. Kind of came from a big performance household. My dad loved sports. I got into it at a young age. I loved basketball. I gravitated towards that. I love the fact that you could put in a lot of effort and energy on your own and see your game grow. You could see tangible results. I love just kind of working with things physically there, and you could see your progress. And so I fell in love with that process, with training and working out and things of that nature. So I always wanted to do something with sports. So when I got to college, I kind of gave up sports for a while, then kind of came back to it as a coach. Just started working in player development, kind of sharing that love for training, that love for practice with other players, other athletes, and entering into the process of development with them. And I love the physical side. I got certified in strength and conditioning and kind of combined my knowledge of the skills of the game, of basketball, of soccer, of volleyball, and then also working on the physical side as well. And as I was doing that, this kind of passion for psychology was growing, and I thought I wanted to be a therapist or a counselor, clinical psychology, social psychology. All these things were kind of swirling about, and discerned that for many years, and started taking steps. I was in a doctoral program for clinical psychology. I started a number of years back. And in the background, once a week, I was working with athletes on the basketball court. I was training them, and I loved my clinical psychology program, but those hours on the court with those athletes was the most fun I had all week. It was the most fulfilling time. And I was in this program. I started to have a different view on the court working with athletes, more psychological view of their nervous system, of their brain and body, and how it all kind of fit together. And I just started thinking of like, man, I think this is how my dreams are changing and shifting a little bit. I don't think I want to go the clinical route. I think I want to work in a little bit more of an informal setting with athletes as a coach, and be there and bring a psychological perspective and help them physically, but also mentally. So after finishing the master's portion of the program, I decided to leave the institution and begin my own business where I kind of combine the mental and the physical, working with athletes in a more holistic approach.
You know, the Olympics is going on right now, and obviously there's a lot of excitement about USA Gymnastics. The men's team last night got the bronze medal in the team competition. And as someone who's been in this field for going on my 44th year, the day after Labor Day, when I start my 44th year of work, having been the team psychologist back in the 80s with the U.S. Cycling Federation, I was in the 84 Olympics and went to 3 world championships in 83 in Switzerland, 85 in Italy, and 86 in Colorado. I worked with these men and women on visualization, mental preparation, mindsets, attitude, confidence, the whole thing. But I've been really fascinated with our Olympic program now, because most all of the athletes talk about the mental side of what they're doing. And a lot of them use sports psychologists. A lot of the teams have sports psychologists. I know in 1984 in the Olympics, I was one of 5 original sports psychologists for our Olympic program, working with the cycling team. And last night in the men's gymnastics team competition, the USA got a bronze medal. And what intrigued me was the young man who competed last on the pommel horse. He didn't do anything else. And they kept talking about him. There he is sitting with his real thick glasses, visualizing, relaxing on the bench. And the announcers were really intrigued. What's going through his mind? What's he thinking? He's trying to obviously get ready. And then he had a stellar performance and secured the bronze medal for the United States. And what I love the enthusiasm of the team that these gymnasts had together. They were truly a team, and picked him up in the air. We're so happy, But as the other athletes were competing, the announcers were talking, what's going through his mind? What's he doing? And afterwards he said, well, I just kept visualizing and visualizing and visualizing my routine. So when I got on the horse, I didn't really have to think about it. It just happened.
Mm-hmm.
The mental side, David, to me, is the difference between two athletes who are physically trained. If you have a strong mind, a strong focus, a good attitude, you've got a greater chance of success than if you don't. I want to get your thoughts on that, and how important do you think mental preparation and visualization is for success?
Oh, absolutely. And I saw that as well. And they even had the timer, time until he was on the pommel horse competing of like 2 hours, 15 minutes, and he's there, just waiting. And yeah, it's kind of funny to hear other people's perspective of like, yo, is he anxious? Is this or that? And he's just locked in visualizing. And I'd agree with you. I think the mental side is what separates. Because at the end of the day, we're not programmed robots. Nor as coaches do we want athletes to be programmed robots. We're coaches. We want athletes to be people who want their emotions, their feelings, their thoughts, everything. They
Look,
can't just kind of,
let me interrupt you for a
yeah.
second. If they are robotic, why do you think that's not good?
I think as a competitor, you need to be adaptable. You need to be adaptable to circumstances. Sports and games are complex, and there's a level of unpredictability and uncertainty always there. And I think that's why we love it. If we knew everything and everything was certain and predictable, I think competing would be no fun. We would already know the result. But it's because of the unpredictability and things come up that you have to, 2008 Beijing Olympics, right? Michael Phelps goggles breaking, things like that. It happens to the best people in the world. It also happens to U7 soccer. Like both, polars there are experiencing some unpredictability. And I think as athletes, if you're just a programmed robot and you're kind of rigid in what you think and what you do, and you operate under certain conditions all of the time, then you don't have that flexibility that you need in competition to adapt and overcome challenges when they come up. And you can't grow, past your comfort zone as much.
On my desk at my office, I have a little figurine of Gumby and and his horse Pokey. He sits on the horse, and then next to that is a wooden golf driver from many years ago that's been molded into the shape of a pelican.
Mm,
And I use those two pieces of equipment to demonstrate exactly what you're saying. Gumby's flexible; he can move around, switch, change, but the driver is hard as a rock, doesn't
mm,
change. And when I work with the athletes, I say you've got to be flexible, not just physically in terms of stretching, but mentally in terms of stretching. You've got to be adjustable to different situations. You have to be able to react to what's going to come on. Because I just had a golfer in my office yesterday who is a very good high school golfer. He just played in the tournament and did his practice round. He shot one under par, and in the tournament, the 2 rounds, he was 5 and 7 strokes over par. And as we talked about it, he wasn't able to adjust to his round. It started off poorly
mm.
both ways, and it just sort of fell apart. And he recognized after we talked yesterday, you're right, Dr. Jacobs. I wasn't flexible enough. I just got too upset with the first
Mm.
hole, hitting a bad shot, and it just carried over. And so flexibility, mental flexibility is so important. Visualization is so important. Preparation is so important. What do you see in young athletes today, David, that can sometimes hinder that with them, and
Sure. Yeah.
especially from the role of parents and coaches?
Yeah. And part of what I see resonates with me because it was part of my own experience growing up. My dad, I was lucky enough, he liked learning about these things mainly because he was a golfer and liked to apply it to his own golf game and trying to get better. But talking about visualization and imagery and imagining yourself doing well and being able to picture that. So I had a little bit of a background on what visualization was, but it was pretty one dimensional. I only thought visualization was just picturing the good things and yourself doing well. And sometimes that would work, and a lot of times it didn't work. And it wasn't until later on that I realized really all of what visualization is, and the different types of imagery that you can do as an athlete. And so my favorite is that kind of, I think, general like motivational imagery, and even being able to picture things going wrong, being able to picture things that are realistic. Like if you're a swimmer, your goggles breaking, you're filling with water. For me, like basketball, making a turnover. If I'm a point guard, I'm going to make turnovers. That's just the reality of it. So I need to be able to adapt in those situations, make adjustments. Okay, why did the turnover happen? Can I fix that? Can I move on to the next play? So now my team's not down a man on defense and I'm too distracted by my mistake. So a lot of times I think the key word here is expectations. Athletes nowadays feel like in order to be confident or a good athlete, they need to just expect that they will be at their best all the time, that they will always have their A+ game, that they'll always make the final shot or make the right decision, when that's just not the reality. I think what it comes down to is, can you win? Can you do well with your B game? With your A- minus game, with your C+ game? Maybe when all things aren't firing on all cylinders, can you still make adjustments? Can you still stay in it and be adaptable, rather than having this unrealistic expectation and putting that pressure on yourself that things will be great all the time? Can you adjust when things aren't that great?
Well, a great example of that I witnessed myself was 40 years ago in the Olympics in Los Angeles, 1984. I was the team psychologist for a cycling team, and the team pursuit event was an event where we have four riders riding one behind the other. At the end of the track, the lead rider goes up, the other three pass him because it's a bank track. It's a precision event. And one of the things we worked on was in visualization was preparation for things going wrong. We were on $40,000 experimental bikes. Um, it was a lot of technology involved in the design and putting these bikes together, but also in working together. But we talked
Mm.
together as a team about the what ifs. What if this goes wrong? What if this goes wrong? How are we going to react? And so our first ride in the team pursuit, we went a third of a lap, and one of the guy's wheels fell off his bike. The race was stopped. We're allowed to ride again for a mechanical failure. We then rode five or six. There were 16 teams who qualified. 5 or 6 races later, we ride again on the last lap, and we were minus that rider whose tire fell
Mm.
off, wheel fell off. Two of our three guys crashed. We were allowed one crash, one mechanical failure. You get to ride one more time, you qualify or don't. We qualified fifth fastest. No
Wow.
sooner do we qualify fifth fastest, we're riding against quarterfinals where the first riders up against the fourth fastest team in the world, the Danish team, and we beat them by 1/100th of a second, which was
Wow.
to me uh, outside of when my cousin's family or my cousin's force won the Triple Crown in 1978 and confirmed the most exciting thing I ever witnessed. And
Wow.
the thing was, and then we made to the semifinals, beat the West Germanys, and we lost in the finals to the Australians because we had one of our riders' foot came out of the pedal and he
Mm.
fell off the bike at the start. But we had prepared for all these things, and as they've talked, and I had Steve Haig on my radio show, one of the riders who won the individual pursuit gold medal and got the silver at the team pursuit a week ago. He said if we hadn't been prepared and visualized practicing that, the negatives, it would have never worked. So to validate what you're saying, you've got to be able to have the mindset to visualize success, but you also have to have it's sort of plan B, the visualize the what ifs. What if something doesn't happen? Can you give us a specific example, maybe where you've seen that work with somebody, where they're able to get through something when things didn't go right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think the example I'll give kind of shows that it's not always the mistake that's the issue. It's usually our reaction to the mistake. It's usually the freak out when we're not prepared, and then we kind of get stressed, and then things, get worse. So, working with a volleyball libero, right, tough position. It's a defensive position, and you're just cutting angles. You're trying to just dig the ball before it hits the ground. You're also making sure your passes are on target, setting up the setter well so you can set up the hit. So you can feel some pressure working with somebody who's in between high school and the college level, and um, would get in her head, especially if she made a mistake or two. And so for her, it was the high expectations she put on herself, that pressure of expecting, like, hey, like you have to be perfect, you can't make a mistake. And then when mistakes would happen, she'd get down on herself and react to those mistakes, which would lead to more mistakes and performance breakdowns. So being able to have a conversation with her before, a big match coming up that a lot of people are going to be in the stands for, feeling a lot of pressure, and taking time to normalize that, normalize mistakes, and flip it on its head and be like, hey, you can plan for that. Like, let's plan for mistakes. You're a competitor. You know this is going to happen. Some things aren't going to go your way. So let's go ahead and plan for a pass going off target. Let's go ahead and plan that you read a ball late and you're not there. Start to visualize that, kind of working, with her visualization of visualizing that, and then kind of how are we responding to the next play, and then experiencing and talking to her on the other side of it of how that game went. And she started off strong, and then I think maybe second set had a couple of mistakes, being able to bounce back in the third set, team gets the victory. Because there's I think a mental fortitude that was able to be there because she normalized the process for herself and started to decrease some of the pressure she put on herself. So I think that really showed that it's not always the mistakes, it's our reactions to them that can take us out of the game mentally.
Exactly. The reactions, I talk about preparation, focus, attitude, and confidence as the keys to success. And preparation is how you get ready mentally, physically, psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, nutritionally, all the things you do to get ready. Focus is about what you're concentrating on, but what are the distractions that can come up? Because that affects your attitude and affects your confidence. With focus, with preparation, one of the key things is visualizing and mentally preparing for the what ifs, as I call it. You want to prepare for things to go well, but you also want to repair or prepare when things don't go well, and how you react. Because the key thing there is, if you can keep your psyche together when things don't go well, because you've prepared for it, you have a greater chance to move on successfully than if you don't. Otherwise, the bottom drops out.
Right. Right. Yeah. Being able to prepare for it. Yeah. It's that preparation that I think gives that confidence, because then one, you're normalizing things not going well. So you're not freaking out because you're expecting it now. Hey, that's kind of part of the game. That's supposed to happen. So like, I'm okay. I'm not bad. I'm not wrong. I don't suck. It's like, this is expected. This is normal. At the same time, I'm prepared for this, and I'm not going to let it keep happening the same way. I'm going to make adjustments. I'm going to adapt. And we're going to grow from this. And yeah, just being able to take the pressure. I think what I love most about working with athletes is trying to normalize some of these things that are just part of the process of developing, and helping them normalize it, and then realize that, failure is just, incomplete success. Failure is just part of this process, and let's just, tackle it head on. Let's accept it, and let's move through it together. And I'm sure you found it after 43 years of just like being with an athlete in that process, and that relational component really gives them a lot of security, to be able to do it themselves and kind of internalize that.
I work with a number of field goal kickers throughout my career.
Mm.
One I can mention publicly, Nick Lowry, who retired in 1996, was the most accurate kicker in football history, and he kicked more field goals than anybody in football history. I'm currently working with one of the top kickers in the NFL now. And one of the things we always talk about is with preparation, the what ifs. What if the wind's blowing differently? What if it's adjusting? What if the weather conditions are bad? What if it's a game-winning kick? What if it's whatever? And there's one kicker that I work with now, and his philosophy is every kick's a big kick. Doesn't matter what the next kick is, every kick's a big kick. And he said, that way I don't put too much pressure on. I've got to make the kick at the end of the game, or the kick in the first quarter. They're all important, which gives it sort of an even keel with the way he approaches it. And I know there's a Major League Baseball player I'm working with right now who started talking to me a couple months ago, because he was in a slump, and he got my name from some other people. Anyway, we started working on his approach up to the batter's box. When he's in the on deck circle, what's he thinking? And what he was thinking at that time was worrying about screwing up. And I said, so what's happening when you're worrying about screwing up? He goes, well, doc, I'm screwing up. I said, well, okay, then you need to think about what I need to do to succeed. But what happens if I foul off the first pitch or swing and miss? How am I going to adjust back to that? So there's that flexibility part that becomes so important. And that's where I think with any event we do, it doesn't have to be sports. It could be music, it
Right.
could be arts, it could be speaking. If something goes wrong, how do you move on from that rather than get stuck in that? And what I see with so many people, and David, let me get your thoughts on this. I think so many athletes are so focused on being a perfectionist.
Yeah.
And That can come from parents, it can come from teammates, it can come from coaches, whatever. The expectations, oh, you're really good, you should be really, really good, move on. Well, the fact of the matter is everybody isn't going to do that. And it's how you adjust to that. Let me get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's something I've struggled with and still struggle with. I feel like I have a lot of perfectionism from the ways that I grew up and the ways that I started playing sports and put that pressure on myself. And then also our culture, right? We can't kind of disregard that. I feel like, we have such a culture that focuses on the appearances and the images and, the highlights and the edits and the filters and all these things to where we feel like we have to be flawless. We feel like we have to be perfect, when that's not reality, right? That's fake, and that's not real. And so I think, especially young athletes nowadays have that pressure more maybe than ever to appear perfect. And that's not just in this part of their life or that, but most parts of their lives, especially sports. And it's an unattainable ideal. So I feel like you can only lose if you have that. Yes, it can, help motivate you in a way. But I think typically that's motivation out of insecurity and not out of like desire or, something good inside of you. It's typically because you're so afraid that you're not going to be perfect, that you want to try harder, you want to put in more hours or this or that. And I just don't think that leads to a healthy relationship with yourself, or with anybody else for that matter. If you put that on yourself, likely, you are to put that on other people as well. And I think it tends to be really judgmental, and negative rather than seeing the goodness and focusing on, the reality of that we all have imperfections. We all have things we're better at, not so great at, and let's learn and grow together, and be with each other and cooperate rather than just trying to be perfect and, kind of stay in your lane and get above everybody else.
What pops in my mind as you're talking is Simone Biles and
Hmm.
her performance in Tokyo, where she had the twisties and had to withdraw from the vault and event, and she got just reamed on social media in this country by a lot of people. There's a guy that did, I don't know if he still does. He did a podcast show and just totally insulted her, degraded her, and said she's an American and how dare she do this. And I'm sitting there thinking, who are you? Who are
Right.
you to criticize this young lady? You know, first of all, I'd love to see you go down there and do your Chenko vault and end up breaking your neck probably.
Right.
Those are extremely difficult things. These gymnasts at this level make it look so good, and here they are in Paris, succeeding so well. And I love her story about how she's been in therapy, works on herself, has dealt with this issue, doesn't let it bother her anymore. And she's the epitome of a team player, just like the men's team. But as I watched her compete there, you can see in her, yeah, she wants everything to go right, but it's all about her effort, and the effort's there 100%. And whatever she does, she does. Obviously, she's done extremely well so far in the Olympics, and I'm sure she'll continue to do well with it because I think mentally her goal is I want to do the best I can. I don't hear her saying I need to be perfect. I want to try and do the best I can on this. And that takes that pressure off from that perfection that so many athletes have. What do you think about that?
Absolutely. Yeah, and what a role model too. Like I for everybody, but especially the youth growing up and admiring her, like I would much rather see an athlete go through that. Like go through just the rawness and the realness and the honesty of just like, hey, like I'm not perfect. I'm struggling with this. And as I'm struggling with this, I'm seeking help and support. I'm growing, as a human being, not just as a gymnast. And, I'm bringing this forward with me and I'm going to keep showing up and I'm going to keep doing this thing, just in a little bit of a different way, a little bit more of a holistic way. And I think that's such a good role model rather than, someone that never messes up or appears perfect all the time in the spotlight, but just being real and honest and showing that you're a human being. And yeah, sad that, not everybody always sees that all the time, but I just, yeah, admire her and so many others that show that example. And I think ultimately that's what we need is, athletes to show that example that it's not out of perfectionism, but really this desire to explore and discover what you're capable of. Because the reality is that we're all capable of a lot more than we think. We're all capable of a lot more than what we currently believe about ourselves. Even if we have a really strong, sense of self, we're probably capable of more than we give ourselves credit for. We sell ourselves short a lot of time. And so sports are an arena where we can really try and push the boundaries, where we can take risks, where we can play, where we can create and figure things out and try again and again and again and mess up and adjust and learn and have coaching. And I just think it's a beautiful arena that we need to be playful with and try and push people outside their comfort zone while giving them support so that they can realize the fun of that, of getting out of your comfort zone and, realizing like, oh, I couldn't do this and now I can. Or, I was really scared of that challenge, but I overcame it. And actually, I'm stronger than I thought I was. Like, those are the realizations we need to make, whether you're an Olympian, or a 6-year-old soccer player playing youth soccer. I think we all, all of us need to be pushed in that way.
Well, I co-wrote this book with Jeff Montgomery and Pete Malone, and it was my favorite chapter. Embracing failure can
Oh,
lead to
amazing.
and I talk about that because I don't care who you are, what level you're at, you will fail. I mean, no hitters in baseball, that doesn't mean they didn't walk somebody or there was an error. There's all kinds of things that can go wrong. And
Mhm.
so how you adjust and handle that failure is so important. Now, you also are an author of your book, BET, on it, a psychological approach to coaching Gen Z and beyond. Tell us a little bit about your book.
Yeah, absolutely. I was kind of working with a lot of coaches the past year, and I'm realizing that across coaches and sports and ages, there seems to be more stress and mental health issues than ever. I think that's, just general population, but we're seeing it in sports as well. And coaches are, struggling to connect maybe with Gen Z and beyond, different generations that are growing up with social media and these different things. And I'm experiencing that too, just on the player development side and working with young athletes. I think I'm in a unique position because I'm actually the first wave of Gen Z, so right on the cusp. So I grew up in middle school and high school with social media and all these different things, and I saw how it affected my own performance. I felt like I couldn't make a mistake in competition. I was so afraid to fail, and I
Why?
think part of
Let
that's
me ask you.
yeah.
Let me ask you why you were so afraid to fail. Why didn't you think you could make a mistake? Where did that come from?
I felt like, that's who I was. And if I wasn't good, then I was a nobody. I was so afraid that, I put all my eggs in the basket of kind of being athletic or having this image of this good athlete that I thought that was, my identity. I didn't think I was much more than that. So I felt like I needed to do everything right. And that locked me up. Whenever I would compete, and basketball was my primary sport and soccer secondary, whenever I would compete, I wouldn't play my game. I wouldn't play like I could play in practice because I was scared to be creative. I was scared to take chances. I was scared to take a shot. I didn't want to mess up. So I felt like I needed to make 5 positive plays before I even gave myself permission to go for something or take a chance. So I'd
Did
always
that come from the coaching you were getting?
I think it was a mixture. I grew up with some pretty high standards too. Some of it was family, some of it was just my own personality. I feel like and makeup and being hard on myself and discipline. But the coaches didn't help. I had some good coaches along the way that kind of have freed me up from that. But early on, I've definitely had some coaches that heightened me up even more instead of kind of bringing out my gifts and talents. And I'm grateful, for the whole process, but I'm really grateful for the ones that helped free me up and allowed me to believe in myself and play my game too.
So the emphasis with your book is what then? What was the purpose of it?
Yeah, so the purpose was to help coaches take a nervous system approach to their players and not just seeing players as performances, not just seeing players on the outside, the observations, maybe they come to practice and they're lethargic or rolling their eyes or being dramatic or this or that. Not just seeing them as that, but seeing what's going on in their brains and bodies at a little bit of a deeper level and realizing that many times our nervous system is dysregulated. Maybe we're on edge or we're anxious and we have all this stuff going on in our personal lives, or maybe we feel like we're just in performance mode all the time and we're exhausted and we're in shutdown. But I think really where we need to exist is in connection mode. In connection mode, we can hit the gas pedal when we need to energize ourselves, but we can also hit the brake pedal when we need to take a step back and recover and relax. So really, it's about coaches being empowered to equip their athletes with the tools and the information they need to be able to access the gas and the brake pedal and avoid being dysregulated, being overly anxious or overly in shutdown mode, and being able to self-regulate and control their brains and their bodies.
Where can people get your book?
Yeah, so they can get it on Amazon. So BET, Bet on It, A Psychological Approach to Coaching Gen Z and Beyond. My website also, you can click the link from there. It's realdevelopment.org, RealDevelopment, realdevelopment.org. And that's where they can find it.
Well, David, it's been fascinating having you on tonight. You've got a wonderful future ahead of you. I love your approach and attitude with all this because we need people in this profession who have the same mindset you do, who have the desire to help people and work through this. And I see in the field of sports psychology, it's become such a popular field now. Like I said, it's tomorrow will be 43 years ago I got my PhD, and literally one of the first trained sports psychologists in the country. And now I love meeting people like you who are enthusiastic and want to get going and helping people out. So I wish you the best of luck. If people want to get a hold of you, how can they reach you?
Yeah, they can go ahead on the website too, realdevelopment.org. I have my business number on there, and my email's david@realdevelopment.org, so they can drop me a line through that as well.
Well, look, I want to thank you for joining us tonight. This has been fascinating. And, if anyone wants to get a hold of you, I hope they will. And if you've enjoyed our conversation, go visit my website, winnersunlimited.com, click on the podcast tab. You'll be able to get all kinds of episodes of my show. I've got to close to 10 years of podcasts on there. Connect with me, get a hold of me anyway, drj@winnersunlimited.com, or my office number is 816-561-5556. Remember, my show is every Sunday morning, 7 to 8 a.m. in Kansas City. You can listen to it anywhere on 810whb.com.